Hello everybody, I'm the introverted astrologer and I hope you're all well and in good spirits. I've recently been looking at a most unusual chart. You will rarely come across such a strong Mercury. This is of course the chart of Elon Musk, who is still the world's richest man and who is fervently campaigning with Donald Trump. Whether you like Elon or not, his various ventures have been groundbreaking and jaw-dropping. His recent scheme of giving away $1 million a day has got legal experts scrabbling for their law books. And today we're looking closely at this fascinating birth chart. Can we spot signs of unusual intelligence? Does his chart explain his massive wealth? And what about Elon's endless string of relationships and failed marriages? These are questions we'll probe further. And do look out for my next video on Elon Musk, which will be with you within a couple of days. And this one will look very closely at his next couple of years. We'll be looking into the future and asking another important question. Will Elon Musk be an advantage to Donald Trump in his bid for the presidency? So we're starting off with a quick overview of Elon's natal chart. I can't do everything justice in the one video, but I'll try to pick up some of the main features by looking at his personal planets. Now we need to be very careful with the ascendant and the midheaven of this chart, and that's because we have a 7:30 birth time, but it comes from a biography or an autobiography, and so the data is categorized as B. Now if we were to describe the overall shape of this birth chart, we must remember that we don't count bodies like the node or Chiron, and so what we end up with is a bucket type chart with many planets placed in one half and then a single planet on its own in the other half. So this is tipping us off that Mars might be an important driver in Elon's chart. And we can also see that there is a marked emphasis in air, and in fact the overall signature of this chart ends up being mutable air, which therefore leaves us with a signature of Gemini. Elon's big three are that Cancer ascendant, the Sun in Cancer and the Moon in Virgo. His Sun is actually quite near the ascendant, and if we were looking at the whole sign position of the Sun, we'd see that it is also pulled into the first house. So we could consider that there is this need to shine here, to be centre stage. And Cancer energy is bringing in that tenacity, some sensitivity, some moodiness. And Cancer also can be quite acquisitive. It has a drive for security, for being self-protective and averse to too much risk. And of course our initial assessment of Elon's chart would also highlight that two of his planets are in a special relationship. We call this relationship mutual reception because they are each in signs that the other one rules. And this special pair are the Moon and Mercury. Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, which the Moon rules, and the Moon is in the sign of Virgo, where Mercury holds sway. And this is going to be very important in our delineation, particularly when we also consider that this Mercury is very tightly on the ascendant, and that because there is a Cancer ascendant, the Moon rules Cancer. So these two planets are prominent anyway, but they are now drawn into a special relationship where they help and share their resources with each other throughout Elon's life. What other striking characteristics of this chart are shouting out to us? Well, the harder we look at this Mercury, the more impressed we will be. Remember, Mercury is all about our mental processing, our capacity to think, to analyse, communicate, to process data. And Elon's Mercury is considerably dignified because it is so close to the ascendant. But other details that we'll pick up is that Mercury is actually out of bounds. If we look at this separate measurement, which picks up the declinations of the planets, we can see that his Mercury has moved into more extreme heights and is therefore called out of bounds. Moreover, we will also pick up that the speed of this Mercury was far faster than average on the day that Elon was born. And so this too is adding to its strength. In fact, this Mercury is likely going to behave like a maverick in Elon's life, taking on unusual prominence and dominance. And we can also use other methods of establishing whether a planet has extra dignity or strength. And this includes using terms and bounds. I've brought in Egyptian terms here, and you can see that this Mercury gains extra dignity by being in its own terms, which you can also pick up in the table in the centre of the screen. So overall, to be so tight on the ascendant, to be in mutual reception, to have these extra dignities, this Mercury is incredibly strong. To top it off, it's also tightly conjunct a famous fixed star, Sirius. Sirius is extremely tight to this ascendant, and it's part of the Canis Major constellation. It is the brightest star in the sky, and its name literally means big dog. It's said to bring success and prosperity when it's dominant in a chart, and it certainly is here. It also could indicate this huge will and a drive for success. Interestingly, there's also an association with psychic or intuitive abilities, and I can't find much on Elon Musk and any religious or spiritual beliefs online, so we'll just bear in mind that he could have extra talents here too. In fact, Jupiter and Neptune, so close together, could also well hint at that. But overall, this is a most fortunate connection, bestowing great pride, remarkable creativity, wealth, honours, and we also have that mutual reception between the Moon and Mercury, a Moon which is highly analytical and is actually in the third whole sign house. The third house is concerned with our rational expression, our intellect and our thought processes. Indeed, it is the house that we naturally associate with Mercury. And this Mercury in Cancer works well by using intuition and emotional antenna anyway, but the link to the Moon too is reinforcing this. I hope I've impressed upon you how this Mercury is hugely capable. Its potential is immense. Mercury can also be the freewheeler, the trickster, the trader, and much of Elon's expertise has not involved so much the designing of cars or the vehicles for space trips. It's involved coming in at the right time to take a venture to the next level. And so that need for exhaustive research, razor-sharp analytical skills are critical for Elon. He can time and spot opportunities at lightning speed. He researches deeply, and these are all talents that he's used to become successful. Could there be anything holding back this Mercury? Well, Chiron squares both Mercury and the ascendant, so there is some wounding or vulnerability here. There may well have been earlier bullying in life giving rise to an insecurity, particularly around our physical presentation. But more than this, it's also implying that this Mercury is not mainstream. There is a difference potentially in the mental processing, and this is an aspect that we can often find in charts where there are learning difficulties that are in no way less than but are different. And Elon believes he is on the autistic spectrum. And I have also personally observed that Jupiter and Mars in stressful aspect is often present in the charts of people with autism, and particularly males for some reason. Another Achilles heel with this Mercury is the fact that it is square to Uranus, but it is also contraparallel in the other measurement, the declinations, and so there's a good deal of tense, nervous energy. Now, it's always a blessing to be gifted with the ability to think quickly. And please do look away now if you would find a swear word offensive, because I'm just going to show you some press clippings or tweets from Elon. So as you may be able to pick up, Elon can sometimes speak quickly and rashly, and he can literally lose millions by saying the wrong thing. And indeed, he famously has. There were a lot of examples that I could have picked of this, but he seemed to excel himself when he took on Twitter, and has sometimes used the new X to post comments that are potentially damaging for various people. I'm going to skim quickly over the Sun now, which is quite heavily aspected. So we could expect personal qualities of quirkiness, being very headstrong, confident, fiercely independent and resistant to change. We may well have some control issues, but this is a Sun that would pride itself on being different. The tightest aspect in this chart is actually a minor aspect, but it's just literally a minute away from being perfect. We already identified that this Mars could well be the focal point of this chart, but it's also prominent because it's conjunct the North Node. The North Node tends to amplify things and make them bigger, and Mars is also the midheaven ruler because the midheaven is in Aries. So overall, this is a real driving force in Elon's chart, and with this aspect between Mars and the Sun, we might see a very strong level of self-interest, a potential for conflict, possibly for aggression, and a drive to have things our own way and on our own terms. What about Elon's emotions? Because we have this moon in Virgo, which works in tandem with his Mercury, and this is a very analytical moon, very orderly and industrious, very self-contained in this Virgo energy. There is a reputation for the Virgo moon to be a little cold, and indeed some people with moon Virgo are. But it isn't that the moon here is necessarily uncaring, not at all. We also have many very kind and helpful people with the moon in this position, but it's that need for orderliness, for tidiness, that might lead to an avoidance of more messy emotions. This moon does have a couple of difficult aspects. It is the focal point of a T-square which is pulling in Neptune and Saturn, and so we could well have some emotional repression here, potentially early separation from the mother, either physically or psychologically. Sometimes there simply isn't the degree of emotional warmth and support that is needed in young childhood, and so the emphasis shifts to being conscientious, to working hard, to being dutiful, and the square to Neptune is also showing impressionability and escapism. There could be overall confusion too around emotional boundaries, and uncertainty which can lead to some emotional unhappiness in adulthood. We've already looked at this Mars and its relationship to the Sun, but we can also see that it is in the 8th house, whether we are whole sign or Placidus, and so with this we often find crises in the person's life. Mars is much more intense here. The 8th house has those symbolisms of intensity, depth, sexuality, secrets, addictions. The 8th house also dives very deeply, and so research skills would be enhanced here. And with the trine to Venus, we could also consider a heightened sex drive. Because Mars is in Aquarius, we could also anticipate that great energy is applied to projects or goals which have a unorthodox, humanitarian, forward-thinking nature. Aquarius energy is progressive, it's orientated towards the future. As we get to Venus, we could start asking questions about Elon's love life. Why have there been so many relationships in his life? This Venus is in light, flirtatious Gemini, so we know that Elon would need a partner who kept him stimulated mentally. Gemini also isn't necessarily a sign for longevity. Gemini is light and airy, quick on its feet, and it easily gets bored. Venus is also in the 12th house, the house that we associate with self-undoing. And so there have been a couple of other indications along the way too of some difficulty with emotions and an overemphasis on mental activity. Moreover, this Saturn is the ruler of the 7th house, and it too is placed in Gemini, which is in the 12th whole sign house. Incidentally, that Mars trine Venus is well within a 3-degree orb, and this is one of the aspects that Magi astrologers view as being one of the few male supersexual aspects. And perhaps this too might explain the multiples of passing relationships and failed marriages that Elon is amassing. It certainly could also suggest poor choices where an emphasis is placed on sexual attraction and more superficial qualities that don't necessarily stand the test of time. You might have noticed that we also haven't discussed Elon's great wealth whilst we've been looking at his personal planets. And this too is an area that we can fill in further by considering some of the definitions provided by Magi astrology. Magi astrology identifies things that come up with great statistical frequency from the charts of people who are in the public domain. And I have repeatedly seen that there is something in their analysis. If we look at Jupiter and Neptune here in the declinations, we can see that they are very tightly parallel to each other in the southern measurements. And in fact, Mars is there too. And this Jupiter-Neptune is one of the aspects that Magi astrology has identified as being a super aspect. There are around 15 of these kind of super aspects, which they claim gives a person a jump start on achieving maximum success in their life, including financial success. This combination is renowned for artistic and creative ability, and it is said also to confer good health and longevity to whoever has it. Magi astrology also finds a correlation between the asteroid Midas and great wealth, and Pluto too is viewed as bringing in great power and wealth, and that's pretty much across the board. But what's interesting is that Pluto and Midas are within a very close trine, and so together with Jupiter too, they are bringing in some very interesting planetary geometry. So we have these three powerful bodies with symbolisms of wealth and plenty, all pulled together quite closely. If we were using more conventional astrology to look for signs of wealth, we would know that this fixed star Sirius on the ascendant is an immediate clue. But Pluto and Jupiter are actually in a very close sextile with each other, and so this too is speaking of great power and depth. Jupiter seeks to enlarge, to understand and to better something, and so we do find more positive aspects between Pluto and Jupiter to appear in the charts of people who determinedly seek out plenty and therefore find it. I hope you enjoyed that. I've done my best to stay impartial, but we all know that this is a man who arouses very strong opinions either way. And I am going to maintain my impartiality when I look at the next couple of years ahead for Elon. There is such a lot of activity in this man's chart at the moment, and his planetary alignments are fascinating. And we'll also briefly consider whether his bromance with Donald Trump will have any longevity to it. But until then, God bless you and your families, and do take care.